Okay guys, I got my Byrna TCR, aka Tippmann TCR. It had Byrna plates right here on both sides, but the glue on those plates wasn't that great and they both popped off, and lo and behold, the Tippmann logo is still under there. We are going to do a breakdown and overview of my 90 gram modification here, and then a reassembly of everything. So that's what we're working on today. I'm gonna go ahead and take off my mount here. So this here is actually a mount for a scope that I had, and I just used it to mount this quick release. I got that off of Amazon here. Comes over to here, and that's just a quick release hose line assembly. Purchased off of Amazon. And then I got the 90 gram on and off from MCS on here. Set that off to the side here. Okay. Now we're gonna get right into it. Give her the magazines. Alright. Start by popping our optic out of the way. Set that guy off to the side here. Just going to be setting all this stuff off to the side for this video. Normally, if I was leaving everything apart, I'd put it all inside of a container, but for now, we're just going to set it all off to the side. Okay. Now, barrel. And I want to go ahead and pop this front housing. From there, we have this little pin right here. Go ahead and just pop from the top down. Pop that little pin out. And that releases your 12 gram housing here. I have an empty 12 gram in here. So I already had that loose. See, it's empty. Keep that in here so that when I air it up with my 90 gram, all the air don't just come flying out of this port right here. Set that guy off to the side here because I'm gonna keep him. And then this is where loosen up all of the screws on the shell here. I leave most of them in place. These two long screws here are going to come all the way out. Set those off to the side. Okay, now we have an interlocking piece right here that we don't want to snap and break. So you can start popping your shell. And you also don't want everything to come flying out at you. I guess it helps if you get all the screws. There we go. Start popping this shell apart. If you hold down on this handle here and kind of squeeze the back right here as you're lifting up on this shell, you can unlock those two pieces and pull your shell apart somewhat without all of that flying apart on you. I'll show you where all those hardware go. I didn't mean to tilt that over like that. Kind of just meant to set it off to the side with all the hardware still in it. All right, we're actually going to set this back there. Just leave those there for now. Okay, here's the inside. We got your mag release. We want that to go back in. Set that off to the side. You got your transfer tube here for your air. Pop that guy out of there. We want that to go back in, so we're just going to set that right off to the side for now. Your whole trigger assembly is going to come out. It has a little pin here. You want to keep that. Your trigger has this little knot on the back here that interlocks with that little lever back there, and you have to make sure that goes back into the little hole when we're putting it back together. And then from the back side here, pop out our safety. Okay, now from here you want to kind of, it's all spring loaded here, holding in everything. So we are going to take our breech and ever so slightly push against that spring and lift up on it. And it's going to come forward. And then we can finish lifting up and get that all the way out. Now your breech has this little O-ring here, and we want to make sure that O-ring goes back on, goes right here in the breech for when all of this is getting shoved forward. Okay, now you see your detents here. They go a certain direction in here to where your ball rests against that detent there. This detent and this detent both sit in a groove inside the plastic housing. I just leave that one down in there. We'll leave that detent in there and leave this detent in here. Okay. Now we can pull our housing out. And it's got a little transfer tube here. It's got two little O-rings on each side. You don't want to hurt that. You want to save that just like the other transfer tube. Keep everything good. Now here's my modifications here. I added to my valve here, I added a Tip-X remote line adapter. I took this and I pulled out a little plug that was back here, and I added the Tip-X remote line adapter. This quick release piece comes at the end of the Tip-X remote line adapter here. I just took that off, and then I went over to Ace Hardware and I got me some fittings, and these are 1/8 inch fittings. This is an 1/8 inch 90 here. We got an 1/8 inch close nip here, and then we got an 1/8 inch by 1/8 inch male threaded to female threaded 90, and then this is a 3/8 MIP plug back here. This is the velocity adjustment regulator, where you go in through the back of here with your Allen wrench, and you can screw this in, and it screws against this spring here, and it has a brass transfer tube in here that pushes against this pin that's spring loaded from the back side here, and that's what allows you to adjust your output in feet per second in joules with these. So I went ahead and gutted that and removed all of that, and I took out this bleeder assembly, and I took out this spring. I left the transfer tube in here because it seemed like it had big enough air volume, and I did not want it to give me spitting issues, so I wanted it to still be able to transfer everything through the transfer tube like it was supposed to, just with the transfer tube fully open, not having none of this spring loaded mechanism in here anymore. And then I went ahead and put it all back together. I red Loctited all mine together. These valves here are like $50, so, and you can get replacements for them, thankfully. So I wasn't too worried about messing it up. So I just went ahead and made it permanent. So that's a permanent valve that'll permanently stay that way. And we'll make sure that it never leaks again. This little piece right here might pop out on you. A little plastic piece here. This just sets down right in here with that little piece sticking forward like that. And when your mag comes up in here, it has a little groove right there. When your mag comes up in here, that groove lines up with that groove, and it releases your balls into your breech. So you want to make sure you don't lose that plastic piece, or it won't release your balls into your breech properly. You also have this little plastic piece that pops out. You might be able to lose. That's just to hook up a hopper. Obviously you're not going to hook up a hopper to this thing, so we're not even going to worry about nothing like that. You just want to make sure it stays in. Alrighty. This here is your air chamber, and it has your firing pin and all that good stuff in there. This is where your air transfers through that little transfer tube into here, and it pops this little pin out, and that little pin comes against this little lever that I was talking about here, and every time it airs back up, that pin pops back out to rest against this, and you fire. Pop, 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 pop. So that's why it's detrimental that that be pushed back all the way, and that on the trigger gets put back into the groove properly. Alrighty, so I didn't do anything internally on this. This is all still stock. The only modifications I made were to this valve here, and so this piece has a little groove right here, and this slides down in here, and that lines right into that groove, and it pushes back down into there just like that. And you want to make sure that little pin is pushed all the way in. If it's not during reassembly, you could snap that pin in here, trying to snap this all back together. So you want to make sure that's seated properly. Okay guys, now we're going to put it all back together. That's what I did for my modifications there. And get that remote line adapter hooked up, and then hook up your 90 gram. I hooked up HPA. It gives me funny results. I still get the same amount of joules, but it's intermittent. Like it's like it takes a while to fill back up with air. Like I pull the trigger, it's a long pull. I have to hold the trigger. It gives me like a second or a second and a half pause before it fires. Bam. And then I have to release the trigger, let it fill back up with air, and then do it again. Hold the trigger. It gives me a one and a half second pause before it fires, and then bam. But I mean, it does fire. It's just really weird results on HPA. 90 gram, it loves 90 gram. Ta 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 ta. Just dropping it at 60 joules. So we're keeping 90 gram set up. I love it that way. And we'll be putting all this back together now. All right. Putting this thing back together. We want to make sure we have our grease out. Sure we just little O-rings here, so, and we're using 90 gram. You don't want those to freeze real bad. Okay. Oh, something I forgot to explain. In order to get all of this to fit, I had to chop up the back side of my launcher here. I cut out a bunch of plastic here on both sides. So you're gonna have to do the same thing, where you take out some of the plastic here on the housing in order to get all of this to fit in here properly. But you'll know what plastic needs to be removed once you can, you know, put it together for yourself and see how it lines up. All right, from here, so you want to make sure that's seated all the way down in there and that your pin is pushed all the way in. Put this transfer tube back together with that housing there, and then we're gonna drop this right down into its cradle here. Just let that sit right in its cradle there. And then from here, push this forward. We're going to put our trigger mechanism back together. Actually, I'm going to put the spring and the breech back in. So, go ahead and get you some grease, some lube, whatever it is that you're using to make sure your O-rings stay good. Set that right back into its cradle here. What I do here, because you don't want to mess up that detent down there, but you got to get this to sit all the way in. Press against that spring a little bit and line that detent up with that groove there. So I lift up on the spring, put a little bit of tension here, push in until it lines in with this groove and goes straight down in, and that'll push that detent into its groove and set all this into its housing properly. That's set into the launcher. It could still come flying out at you, but it's pretty well in there as long as you don't go bumping nothing crazy. From here, we want to put our trigger mechanism back together. Start with this little pin. This little pin sits down into that little groove there. And then you want to take your trigger, line that pin up with that hole, and then when you drop this in, there's a little groove for it to sit in right there. You want to make sure that sits in its groove. You want to make sure that that little pin sits in that pinhole in the back there. Once the trigger's in and it sits in that cradle perfectly, you can take your safety, pop it back down in, just to where it locks down into place, and that locks into your trigger mechanism properly so everything still works when you hit your safety and fire back and forth. Now from there, put our transfer tube back in for our air. Go ahead and grease this bad boy up here. Start pushing it all the way into a cradle on that side. Line this side up and then pull that piece forward into the trigger. Make sure all that lines up properly. And now this has to sit perfectly because this has a groove here with a groove for your transfer tube, and it has to sit into this cradle. So that has to sit just right coming back across here for this stuff to line back up properly. Now, I'm going to drop your mag release back in. It has a spring here. That spring sits down into a little tiny notch right there, and that goes into place. Okay, from here you want to make sure everything's still held into its cradle nicely, and then we'll take the two housings and we can put them back together. I start at the front here, line everything up, make sure everything's going to line up properly with your transfer tube. Sure that's all going to sit down into the cradle properly. Make sure your safety lines back up with its little hole properly. And then you're going to have to take something and pop your mag release into its groove. Pull forward until that slips down into the groove. And then you should be able to start at one side, snap that side together, get it to come across to your interlocking pieces here, so you can snap those two pieces together without snapping anything. And then you can bring your two pieces fully together. I start by just getting one started for now. And then where I have these two cradles here, go ahead and do a couple more just so it holds it together for now. And then back here in the back, because these two housings held together the way they are, I had to put a little bit of extra pressure on my two halves to pull them together, and then get that screw in there. Bring that together nice and snug. Bam. And that holds the two housings together properly. I came back down into here. And I did the same thing. You don't need a lot on this. You're not trying to hurt your plastic. I'm just bringing the two housings together and it's helping me. Just enough to get these snug on these two bolts, where it's nice and tight against all of this now. Okay, now you should be able to just go through, snug everything down now. Take these two long bolts that go right back into this part. Alright, now drop your CO2 housing back in, snap it back into place, take your little pin, pop it back in from the bottom first, that holds it in place. Pop the front back on. Now it's back together. It could fire. Everything's ready to go. You just finish off by putting everything back on. Handguard, optics. We're gonna go ahead and finish it up by buttoning it up, putting it all back together. I'll go ahead and drop my empty guy back in there. Barrel back into the breech. Some people like to do all this with an electric drill and stuff, but I personally don't, because I don't like to strip anything on my launchers, and drills just strip stuff out. So I can feel what my hands are doing, I can feel what the wrench is doing. I know nothing's getting over torqued or stripped. I know everything's perfect when it gets put back on, and that's what we're looking for. So line everything back up. Where we had it. Drop my optic back on. I don't want to strip those. That's actually a different bit. Go ahead and use the right one. Okay. Now, got my remote line adapter here. It's a quick release. Just go ahead and quick release that back on. I like to bring it around the front side here, because when I'm holding on to it, it doesn't get in the way. My thumb goes around everything nicely. I can hold everything. It doesn't bother me in any way. This comes around to the other side. Bam. 90 gram installed. Got a fresh 90 gram here. This will go right here. I like to use Teflon because I keep it on my launcher and ready to go, and it can stay like that. I mean, I've had one stay going on 6 months now and still have plenty of air every time I use it, plenty of CO2, so maybe even longer than 6 months, to be honest with you. So that'll go in like that. I'll finish screwing it in. Bam. 60 joule launcher. I took apart my mag. It used to be a 12 round mag, but upon taking it apart, and I don't even remember what little plastic piece in here I trimmed, but I was just trying to get a couple more balls in, but it only made it a 13 round mag. So I got a 13 round magazine here and a 7 round magazine here for a total of 20 rounds. And we get a lot more than 20 rounds on a 90 gram, but that's way better than the 12 gram was doing. There she is. Thank you guys for tuning in. That's my modified TCR. It takes 90 gram. Thank you guys. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Go ahead and subscribe for more good videos. Thank you guys.